Good evening, all. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. I've opened the virtual doors and I'm watching those numbers boost up. We have a little over 40 registered for tonight. And it's like watching the stock market do well. I'm watching those numbers bump up. Okay, so it is 6:30 and we are going to be attentive to everyone's time frame. I want to say welcome very much to tonight's Zoom program we are hosting. The reason that we're still doing virtual programs at the Schaumburg Library is because our renovation is nearing its final stages and all of our rooms and our meeting rooms have been used and filled to capacity. So we're still tapping into virtual options. I do very much look forward to welcoming Jean and Linda back again when we can meet in person. But for tonight, this will suffice. I'd like to welcome back Linda Dressler and Jean Walters. And we're going to be talking tonight about the top 10 questions for home sellers. They are going to be returning on March 11th about home buyers' top 10 questions. My name is Patty Smolin, and I put my email in the chat. Just if you have any general questions that you want to send me in regards to reference or the library. I work as a business reference librarian, so the nature of my work is general reference, but it is also to promote programs and materials in financial literacy to those that are in job and career transition and to start or grow their business. So jobs, business, and money. And tonight, this fits the money portion of it. So I want to hear from Linda and Jean. Please tell us what's happening with the market, friends.
Hi, Patty. Thank you for such a kind introduction. We are so happy to be here again this year to present to the patrons on home selling. Top 10 questions.
It's great to be back.
Thank you. You should have received from Patty a few pages. You don't have to follow along with those pages. They're just for your own reference. You received a current market January 23 over January 24 for both Schaumburg and Hoffman Estates. You also received a seller's roadmap, and that's in both English and in Spanish. You should have received a moving checklist, kind of like a time frame to follow for moving. And you should have also received a handout on all the things that a realtor does, what's involved in selling your home. My name is Linda Dressler, and I'm with Remax Suburban. I'm right over by Golf and Schaumburg Road, not far from the library, or Golf and Roselle Road, not far from the library. I must have been thinking of the library. I've been selling real estate full-time since 2007, which wasn't necessarily the best time to join, but I am still here. I love my job. It's full-time. I get so much fulfillment from helping people. And it's an interesting job because it's not doing the same thing day in and day out. There's a lot involved in it. So I really, really like it. I've lived in Hoffman Estates since 1994. And I'm also Hoffman Estates Park District Commissioner. So good evening. And this is my friend, Jean Walters.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jean Walters, as Linda said. I've been with Home Trust Mortgage for 12 or 13 years. I've been in the business for over 25 years. I basically work with buyers, but I also help sellers and sellers agents understand a little bit about the mortgage process and what types of offers might be coming in and why they may or may not be good or bad offers.
Absolutely. So we wanted to tell you a little bit about the market. You've heard, no doubt, and seen on social media, read articles about what's going on. So what I wanted to talk about was that if you are in the market to sell, prices locally have gone up from 20 to 25% since only 2022, which is a lot. So your house is kind of like your bank account, right? Because you should have some equity in your home if you've owned it for a while. Property prices have stabilized, although they're much higher than they were a few years ago. Inventory is still very low. I was looking at the inventory last week, and it's less than a month's inventory, which means it will be exhausted quickly, right? In less than a month if buyers bought everything. Interest rates began to increase in about March of 2022, was it, Jean?
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere around March of 2022. Can you talk a little bit about interest rates and the hype that I hear about feds are talking about decreasing the rate and how it relates to interest rates?
Yeah, so interest rates are no pun intended, they're interesting. So a lot of people think that when the Fed talks about lowering or increasing interest rates, that they're talking about are directly related to mortgage rates, and they're not. Sometimes the Fed might reduce rates and rates might go up, mortgage rates might go up, and vice versa. Right now, however, the Fed is talking about raising or reducing interest rates because of inflation, trying to, hedge inflation or stop inflation, or trying to, determine whether or not they need to slow the economy, things like that. So right now, the word on the street is that the Fed's going to leave interest rates alone. And month or so ago, the word was that they might start easing a little bit and maybe even start reducing a little bit. And when that talk came out, mortgage rates went down a little bit. But then some key indicators came out in the past couple of weeks that contradicted that mentality, and they kind of made it look like there might be still a little bit more inflation going on. So mortgage rates went up a little bit. But now there's some reports this week that we are hoping might come out, and they might indicate that no, things still aren't, inflation is easing a little bit. And if the Fed comes out and says that they might start seeing some need to reduce the rates, or at the very least leave them the same, then we might see rates drop a little bit. And I'm not talking about a half a point or a point. We're talking maybe 0.125 or 0.25. So we're hoping to see the last of the increases in mortgage rates, but a guy from the Fed could come out and breathe the wrong way or sneeze, and rates go up a little bit temporarily. So they can be that temperamental and that volatile. But the overall consensus is that we'll start seeing them lower, drop a little bit over the next 6 months to a year.
When I think for such a very long time, they were so low. So that became the expectation, right? But
Yeah.
there have been times in history where it's been in the teens, or up towards
Right.
20%. That's still less than you're paying credit on interest on your credit card, but it's on a pretty large balance when you're talking about a home. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but so have you checked interest rates today for somebody with good credit, 30-year?
Well, unfortunately, interest rates are they're credit score dependent.
Yeah.
They're also loan amount dependent, or they can
Absolutely.
be, and they can also be income dependent. So we're seeing them anywhere from the mid to upper sixes up into the lower to mid sevens, depending on your overall scenario. And that's a little bit higher than they were recently, but not as high as they were in the recent past.
But there's still plenty of buyers out there. And what we tell our buyers, and that will be in 2 weeks from now, is what's the term? Yeah, date the rate. You don't marry it or something.
Marry
Get it wrong.
Marry the
There you go.
and date the rate.
There you go.
So and the interest rates right now are not necessarily deterring
Oh, not
the
at all.
home buyer per se.
No.
So that the home buyer is not, there's gonna be home buyers out there. It's, the psychological challenge of, having a 2 or 3% interest rate now on what you own and then selling that and buying something in the sixes. It's a little hard to wrap your head around that, but we're going to see, in my opinion, I think we'll see lower rates in the near future in the next couple of years.
That's good news. I like that. So if you took these out or wanted to look at these for the market, just a quick little thing that I always do at networking events, and people are just shocked by it. So I'm only going to look at the detached single family homes. So for example, in Schaumburg in 2023, there were 27 new listings, 27 houses, 27. That's it. January of this year, there were only 19. That's almost a 30% drop in listings. If you talk about average sales price, it was about $414 in January of 23 and $430 in January of 24. That's about a 4% hike in price. And the market time went from about 53 days to 26 days. Now, these were Schaumburg numbers that I'm quoting. If you have any questions about stats or numbers or anything like that, you have my information. You could always give me a call and I could answer any personal questions about stats. All right. So now we're getting into the top 10 questions. And the question number 1 is, should I use a real estate agent or a realtor? Some people know this, some people may not, but a real estate agent is anyone who's licensed to help people buy and sell commercial or residential property. A realtor is a trademarked term that refers to a real estate agent who's an active member of the National Association of Realtors, the largest trade association in the US. The difference is they abide by professional standards and a code of ethics. So there's a remedy. You know, we all agree to be above the line when you agree to be a realtor. So there's some remedy to that. How do you choose a realtor? Well, you should, just like anything else, ask for personal referrals. If your friends or family were happy, odds are you'll be happy with the realtor. You should interview prospective realtors. You should probably Google them, see if they're full-time, see what you find out about them, see what reviews are online. You can request previous and current client testimonials from a realtor. You can review prospective realtor sales history, which is very important. The biggest thing in hiring a realtor is, well, there are 3 things. The first is your personalities have to match, right? Sometimes a realtor is more analytical, right? Sometimes a realtor is more of a people person. Sometimes a realtor is going to be the big boss and tell you do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, right? And kind of make you toe the line. So it all depends on your personality and who you want to work with. The second thing is, how do they communicate? How well do they communicate? If you prefer a phone call, is your realtor always trying to text you, right? That may not work for you. And the third thing is, what are they doing to market your listing? What makes them stand out? How are they going to do things differently? If they're just going to take your listing and put it in the multiple listing service and not do anything else, is that what you want? Is that full service enough for you, right? So you'll want to check those things with a realtor. You don't always want to select an agent because they offer the lowest commission. The knowledge a top realtor will have of local real estate market is amazing. By having strong knowledge of the market, a real estate agent knows what your house is going to sell for. There are some agents out there who will tell you what you want to hear. And I many times have had to beg forgiveness at a listing appointment and just say, do I have your permission to tell you the truth? Because when I'm telling you the value, I don't want you upset 6 months from now, right? 3 months from now, a month from now, saying, why isn't my house selling? You know, if you decide to market it $20,000 over list price. So sometimes people will tell you a higher price to win your listing, is what it's called. And that's not really going to do you any good or be beneficial to you. So I also gave you a little handout, 20 reasons why to hire a realtor to sell your home. It's kind of fun. It has little graphics on it. You could see all the things that we do. I always thought that it was just looking at pretty houses. There's a lot more that goes with it. When is the best time to sell your house? What do you think, Jean?
As soon as there's a willing buyer.
That's very true. A ready, willing, and able buyer. I'd say, personally, I say anytime is the right time to sell your home. So there are a lot of people who wait. They wait for spring, you know. Now, spring market for us, we're in a weather challenged environment here. So normally people pull their listings and don't put their listings on, I'd say between Thanksgiving and Super Bowl Sunday. Why? They're home more. They don't want snow traipse through the house. You know, it's just inconvenient. However, I think that they should be left on whenever you want them on, because if your home is on the market in December and all the others are waiting to put it on until March, who's there? You. So you've got less competition. So really, in my opinion, anytime's a good time to sell a house. And it all depends on what you, the seller, needs, because there is no transaction that's cookie cutter. There's an outline. You'll see a home selling, you know, roadmap. There's an outline of how things are supposed to go, but that's just an outline. The rest is the details and the finesse and your needs and wants and criteria. So you may wonder what your house is worth, because now I've just told you those prices are high for homes. You can, of course, get a market analysis of your home. What that is a report. I pull the last 6 months, because if you go further than 6 months out, it really was a different market. It's not the same as it is right now. So I go back 6 months and I try to find like properties, a property that is the same model as yours. And face it, we live in Hoffman, Schaumburg, in this area here in the suburbs here. A lot of this was built in the 60s, 70s, you know, and they were like 10 models per subdivision or so, right? And so it's easier to find comps. So like homes, same subdivision, past 6 months, we look at the closed sales. That's going to give you the most data, right? Because that's what a lender actually allowed for a payment for a home, as well as what a buyer paid for a home. When we look at the contingents, the things that are under contract, we don't know how much they sold for. And when we look at a new listing or an active listing, they could want $1 million. So that's really not a good comparative. It is your competition, so it's good to know those things, but it's not necessarily a good indication of what your house will sell for. And a CMA is really useful in just giving you more information. You need to know whether or not you want to sell, right? Are you gonna get what you need to recoup from your house and versus what you owe already? It's not the same as appraisal, is it, Jean?
No, an appraisal is going to be a one person's opinion of what they think your property is worth, independent of what people are willing to pay for it. And it's going to compare only 3 closed sales, and sometimes you know, the appraiser is supposed to look within your neighborhood, but they can go outside the neighborhood. But it is definitely a completely different report. It's got a lot of the similar features. It's going to kind of tell you what that person thinks your property is worth now versus what it might sell for. Because a lot of times it might sell for more than what it's worth now, and it will still appraise at that for later because, you know, a property is only worth what someone's willing to pay for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are all different kinds of appraisals too, aren't there? Not
Yes,
just, there's a different one, like if you're, what? Like for insurance versus for a loan versus, right? Aren't there
Yeah.
different?
yeah, insurance is gonna have their own, they don't do a full regular appraisal, but they're gonna have their own idea of what a property is worth and the rebuild cost, and they might not take the land into consideration because they're in, you know, they need to recuperate, insure against losses for the actual
the home,
building. And,
yeah. Yeah, so they're all different kinds. Okay. Now, when I meet someone and give them the CMA, that gives me information, right? It tells me what I believe a house is going to sell for. So you'll see, this is just a little sample. You'll see, let's say the market value up on the corner is, and it's blocked a little bit, 130,000. This was for a little condo. You have to pay title fees. That's the top line, right? So depending on the price, the title fees are different. So I put that in there. You have to pay state and county transfer taxes. For Illinois and Cook County, it's $1.50 per thousand of the price sold. So that's on there. There's a village transfer tax. In Schaumburg, it's $1 per thousand versus in Hoffman Estates, it's $3 per thousand. I do this for every single listing appointment I go to because this information is going to tell you more bottom line, right? What you're going to walk away with after expenses. Now, of course, you'd have to deduct from that any mortgage you owe, maybe any home equity line you may owe on, right? From that dollar amount to get your bottom line. But I think it's very valuable information, and not every listing agent brings this to you. I think it's very important. The next line that is property taxes. And while this isn't an expense of selling your home, it's something that's going to be deducted from the sale of your home. So I think it's important that you know that. In our area, we pay taxes in arrears, which means that we pay this year for last year's taxes. So for whatever you've not paid already in taxes, up to the day you move out, you're going to have to give the buyer that money, so that the buyer can pay your taxes when they get the tax bill. That's why that line item is there. Now, remember, if you have any kind of escrow account for your taxes, once you close, you'll get a refund of those monies so that you'll get them back. Then there's the brokerage fees. My company collects a certain percentage, and it's divided between the buyer's agent and myself. So I put that on there. There's attorney's fees in this part of the state, and it's different, right? Depending on where you are, we use attorneys here, and they make sure that they're looking out after your best interest. They pull the title, they pull the survey, they do a lot of things. And then also at closing, explain every single document you're writing, you're signing, what you're doing so that you understand the transaction. And then I always put in a little bit for miscellaneous because there's something that comes up, isn't there? All right. How long will it take to sell your home? Well, there are a lot of factors that go into that. I did tell you that currently in Schaumburg, it's like 30 days, I think I said. I don't remember. Let's see. Hoffman Estates, it's 38 days. And in Schaumburg, it was 26 days.
now that's not how long it stays on the market before you get a contract. That's from the time it lists to the closing.
Till the time it closes.
Yeah.
So they're closing pretty quickly. So the length of time it takes to sell a home, it's not concrete. There are many factors that contribute to the amount of time it will take to sell a home. For those home sellers who are wondering how long does it take to sell a home, some of the biggest contributing factors that are important in that are the current state of the real estate market. Well, right now it's a seller's market because there certainly is not enough inventory. The listing price will matter, right? If you're realistic with your listing price, then I always say if it's priced right for condition and location, then you should have no problem selling it quickly. We're still seeing in this market a lot of multiple offer situations where you're getting more than one offer. It doesn't always happen that way. You as the seller have the right to say whether or not you would like to put a call out for highest and best, meaning that if you get 10 offers, you can email all 10 and say, we've received multiple offers. We would, we want you to present us with highest and best. If in fact you choose not to do that, that's okay too, because again, you're in the driver's seat. The minus to calling for highest and best is out of those 10 offers, you might have 3 that will withdraw because they just don't want the competition. But any real estate professional should be able to talk you through what could happen, right? And what the best strategy is. I myself will say things like, because I don't ever assume that your strategy is my strategy. So I will tell you, you could do A, B, or C. This might happen with A, this might happen with B, this might happen with C. And then you make the decision because you should be the one to do that. Did that door open? Oh, it did. There are different strategies that might be used. You may want to price it just right, just where we find the average market. You may want to price it a little bit under to make it seem really competitive, to create a little bit of a stir to hopefully get multiple offers to push it up. You may say, I think mine is worth $10,000 more than you're telling me, Linda, and you just may want to put it in at that $10,000 over. And that's up to you. Again, it's your home, it's your decision, right? So that will depend, that will let us know. It determines how fast something's sold. That's enough for that. Okay. I get this question all the time. I go on what's called pre-listing appointments. And it's kind of like, Linda, will you come see our house? Will you give us a market analysis? Will you tell us what we need to do to sell our house, more quickly? Like, what's the most cost-effective thing that we can do that, to sell our house? Or maybe you're in a situation where you can't afford to fix your house, and that's okay. You just need to price it for the condition of your house. There are some realtors who will come in, I think I said this when we started, and say, paint the walls gray, fresh paint, new carpet, we'll list it, wash your windows, whatever their case may be. Again, there's no cookie cutter answer to this question. So should I make repairs or improvements before listing the house? There may be some things that are really glaring, right? The things that you've been meaning to do forever that you don't see anymore. There are some of those in my house too. I think there's a switch plate someplace that isn't put back up after painting because I didn't pick the right one. But so those kinds of things. So I look around the house with fresh eyes, and I can tell you that. If you don't want to make any improvements before listing it, that's fine. Can you take your favorite light fixture? Please do. If you have a pretty antique stained glass chandelier that you want to keep, I want you to take it down. I want you to take it with you. Now, you could either take it down, or we could just put a note in saying that that's not going with. Should you stage your home or sell it empty? I always find that selling a home, if you've ever looked at pictures online, have you seen pictures where it's empty? It looks fine. You could see the whole house, right? It's furnished well, kind of like a model home, right? You've got all the furniture that fill out the rooms, not stuff in the rooms, but fill out the rooms the way it should look, functional house should look. That's great. What's the worst is if it's half lived in. If you don't have a lot of furnishings, it's really hard, because what happens is I have someone professional come take the pictures. I hire them. And it's hard to see the rooms. It's hard to see the beauty of what a room could be. You're just seeing the stuff, right? So empty or full are my preferences, not half lived in.
Now, what I would recommend is if you're looking to sell and then buy a new place, ask your loan officer, whoever you might be using, to come over to your house and take a look at things from a perspective of a buyer's mortgage company. What types of things would you want to do as a seller to the home to avoid having issues with an appraisal or an inspection from the buyer's perspective? And the loan officer should be able to do that if obviously if they're experienced enough, but these days most of the loan officers are pretty experienced, so you should be able to have that done, and it would help you tremendously to know what, if you don't want to do anything, at least some of the minimum things you can do to make your life easier when a buyer is going through your house.
Well, and from a VA loan or an FHA loan perspective too, from that buyer, you know, there are certain things you have to make sure that are done, because during their appraisal, those two types of loans will check things a little more scrutinizingly than a conventional loan will.
Looking more for hazardous scenarios that you might not even think are hazardous.
Like a missing railing or a loose railing or peeling paint or
GFCIs.
GFCI outlets. Absolutely. What should I avoid when selling my home? Well, I would say selling it by yourself. There is a lot you'll see in that slide or that pass out I gave you. There's a lot involved in selling your own home. A lot of people try to do it, and if that's what you want to do, then that's fine. That's, you know, not a problem. You're allowed to sell your own house, of course. It's your own property, but there's a lot that goes into it. So 90% of the for sale by owners actually end up hiring a realtor. And the ones that do sell, the statistics say that they get 17% less in price than working with a realtor.
Or if you're working with one of those for sale by owner companies that just list your home and maybe charge you a fee. There's a number of them out there that really don't have your best interest at heart. So be careful.
I can remember having a buyer, and we were purchasing a home that was for sale by one of those for sale by owner companies. And when I called to negotiate the contract or to talk about the contract, I was told as the agent for the buyer to sell this, to call the seller directly. And so now I, a seasoned certified negotiator, am negotiating with the seller. I would think that would be very uncomfortable, but if you're good at negotiating, you go for it.
Now that listing agent, quote unquote, would most likely not be an actual realtor, correct?
Correct.
They would be just an agent, because that would not be something very ethical, correct?
No, because you always have to have your seller's best interest at heart, right? That's part of that. You don't want to hire the wrong agent. We already talked about that a little bit. You don't want to price a home too high to test the market, right? Because that'll just cost you marketing time, and it costs you money and bills. You're still paying your utilities, your taxes, your insurance, and in the meantime, you're not able to sell and move on. You don't want to say no to showings that often, right? I know it's very difficult because it disrupts your life. I always try to schedule my listings to go on Thursday or Friday. And I tell my sellers typically, you know, the first day, weekend day of showings, you're probably better off just, you know, going to a family member's home, doing something fun, going to the movies, going to lunch to get out of the house, right? Because there may be a steady stream in this market of buyers coming through. You don't want to be unrealistic with negotiations. But again, I think a lot of that speaks to the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your lending team, your real estate team, giving you the best advice through their experience, right? And that's what you know, it's really tempting to use your cousin or, you know, somebody you went to school with that's a new agent or that has their license. Just make sure they have the credentials and experience to be able to talk you through some of those sticky things so that you understand what's going on. And question number 8 is what marketing strategies will you use, right? We touched on that a little bit when we talked about interviewing realtors, right? So there is so much marketing and so much that can go on right now. A home that's priced properly and given maximum exposure should sell in a really short amount of time and for top dollar. The 4 most important marketing strategies that top agents are using, I added open houses on there, and what sellers should expect from their agents. Real estate agents who are not using the internet or not using social media as a channel to give their sellers home exposure are potentially costing them money and a lot of wasted time. So I know that I use a photographer who gives me all the links to all the mediums. You even get an individual property like website for your property. There's a walkthrough that my photographer gives me, so everything's linked together in a video to kind of walk through the home. Subsequently, what he also does is he does a floor plan, and if it's like a 3-level home, you know, let's say 2-story with a basement, on the floor plan, there are little dots and carrots showing what the vantage point of the picture is, which I personally love, because if you've ever looked at pictures online and you look and you're wondering what the room is or where the room is or how it fits into the scheme of the house, it's kind of a neat thing. So he gives me all the social media links. We put it up on YouTube, you know, it goes all over the place. Examples of content marketing, media like newspapers, podcasts, social media, videos, all these are forms of content and are meant to provide useful and relevant information that attracts people to your home, right? And then the last is open houses. A lot of people use open houses. I'm happy to use open houses, but really and truly, I tell all my sellers this, there are a lot of agents out there doing open houses, aren't there, Gene?
Yes.
And I don't mind doing an open house at all. But again, that's another time block that you'll have to be out of your house 2 to 4 hours on a Saturday or Sunday. And the people that are coming in are usually coming in because they've seen it advertised online, or they've seen signs that people have put around the neighborhood. I'm sure many of you have seen those signs in the neighborhood, right? Who's coming into the house, Gene?
Nosy neighbors.
Nosy neighbors. The people coming in the house, are they necessarily qualified to buy that house?
You don't know.
You don't know, right? So I'm happy to host an open house, no problem. I have never sold a house through holding an open house. Typically, it garners me more business because it's people looking in the neighborhood who may or may not have another realtor.
So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, open houses tend to be for warm, fuzzy feelings for the seller that the realtor's doing their job. And then also for gaining new clients for the listing agent, which is all good. It's all, I mean, there's nothing necessarily, negative or bad about it, unless you have a problem with people coming into your house that you don't know, or that you don't know if they're qualified or vetted, or if
Right.
It's just somebody that is looking, without even
Wants to look at
Thinking
your
of
model or something, yeah, and just see what your model's decorated like, because they've got the same model, 3 houses down or
or
something.
maybe they know your realtor has good cookies.
That's true too. And like I said, I'm happy to host open houses. I usually wait though, for at least a few weeks to just see if we don't sell it first, because an open house then can be valuable information for me. An open house or a broker tour can be valuable information for me to share to you, to say, this is the feedback I've been given, right? So that we can, use that and maybe determine why an offer hasn't been made yet. All right. What can I do if my house isn't selling? Well, there's a chance your home won't sell as quickly as you like. It can happen. If this happens, your home might be overpriced for the market it's in. Or you should compare your listing price to recent sales of comparable properties. What if we ran your comps and you listed it maybe 3 weeks later, maybe 4 weeks later? Well, maybe we should run the comps again. If it's been 4 weeks, that could be a totally different market. Let's say it's between April and May when things start going a little bit faster because kids are getting out of school, people have a mind shift to, to go out and buy their house. We need to look at the comps again. You need good data, you need good information. You also may want to change some staging in your home. Maybe what I like to say to my sellers is that you want to always create the illusion of space, right? If your countertops in your kitchen have all your little appliances, your blender, your bullet, your air fryer, your bread maker, and there's no counter space, that's what people will see. They won't see where they're able to put their things. So
and people are very sensitive to energy in a house and smells in a house.
This is
So
true.
be very conscious of those two things.
yes, I mean, I love dogs and cats, but sometimes we need to take the big pillow that they lay on and put it away, right?
And some people love the smell of marijuana
Oh.
and other people do not. That could be a big deterrent.
Oh my gosh.
Those types of smells, cooking smells.
Cooking smells too sometimes.
Yeah.
If it's been a long time and you're unhappy with your real estate agent, you might be able to switch real estate agents or sell a different way. But make sure to check your contract because you will have a listing contract. Be sure you choose an agent with plenty of marketing know-how and local connections, and that'll help increase your home's visibility and its chance of a profitable sale. You could also take the home off the market until local condition changes. Maybe you're going through something at home and it's too hard to pick up and keep it nice for showings. You can temporarily pause a listing and then bring it on after that. Like if it's a terribly busy time in your life, or if something happens to the home and you really should paint it or take care of something before people come in, or whatever the case may be, you can pause it. There's no problem with that. All right. What are the steps in the selling process? Well, I've given you that home selling roadmap that you're able to use. So let's say you've found the right contract, you've found the right buyer, and you've agreed on a price, and it's going to go ahead and go contingent. What happens next? Well, within the first 5 business days after that contract is signed, the buyer will come in to have the home inspected. When the buyer comes in to have the home inspected, it will be the inspector, should be the inspector. It might be the buyer. It might be the buyer's mom or dad or something, some family members. And then it should be also the buyer's agent. Okay, so that will be anywhere between 1 and 3 hours, depending on the size of your home, that they'll make an appointment to schedule and look through the house. The inspector is checking the mechanicals, the appliances, the windows, the electrical system, the roof, looking outside at the concrete. They're checking a lot of things while they're there. Once that happens, the inspector will give that buyer a list. And usually on the list, these are maintenance things that you should, watch. These are things that you might want to budget for. Let's say you have an HVAC system in your house that's, 10, 12, 15 years old, but still working perfectly fine. They may flag it saying, budget for this in the upcoming years because you'll probably have to replace it. there might be things that are flagged saying, these are health and safety issues. These are things that I definitely, as a home inspector, think need to be remedied, right? So they're gonna look at this list, the buyer's gonna look at this list, and the buyer's gonna tell their attorney, hey, Mr. Attorney, I want GFCI, you mentioned that, GFCI outlets aren't in the kitchen by the water or in the garage. That's a safety issue, and I really want them to put them in before we move in. So they may say that. They may say that HVAC, it's not just 12 years old, it's 26 years old and it's still running fine. I understand that I can't ask for a new one just because it's old. But maybe do you think the seller will give me a home warranty to cover in case it breaks? Because I'm a first-time home buyer and I don't have extra money to spend $8,000 to $10,000 on a new system. So they may ask you that. They send this list then to your attorney, Miss Seller's attorney, and it's another negotiation, right? Trying to get everything wrapped up with a pretty bow that you can both agree on. There's some give and take, you know, but hopefully you can agree on what they've asked for. Sometimes they'll ask for a credit. So maybe, let's say there is a cracked heat exchanger inside your HVAC system and you had no clue, right? But that's a dangerous thing. So they would maybe ask for a credit so that they could replace it when they move in. Sometimes I'll tell you the clue is for a buyer. The buyer will typically ask you to fix it, the seller, if any electrician will do the same job, right? Any tradesperson will do the same job. If it's installing a GFCI outlet, no problem, right? But if it's something where quality might matter, they may ask for a credit instead. And you can rationally know why, because you as the seller would want to spend the least money possible. It doesn't mean that you're trying to do anything bad, right? But the buyer may want a different or better quality, a higher quality than what you're willing to put in. So they may ask for a credit instead. So that could happen. So then you do a negotiation on that. Then there's the, once you agree on that, you're moving forward, you're out of an attorney inspection period. And it is now the mortgage application and appraisal period for that buyer. So an appraiser comes out to the seller's house, and at this appointment, you can stay in the home. I meet the appraiser at the home, or the realtor will meet the appraiser at the home, and we fight for the value of the sales price on that contract. So we give that appraiser any ammunition we need to say, here are the comps I found that support the value. Here are the updates that my seller has done to support the value. These are the features of the home that support the value. And we give that package to the appraiser.
And a good listing agent will feel out the appraiser first before throwing up on him with listings and stuff like that, because an appraiser, if a realtor's first words to an appraiser is, here's all the listings, these are all the closings, it's almost as if that realtor is or that listing agent is second guessing the ability of the and the knowledge of the appraiser. So you know, a good listing agent will kind of dance around that a little bit and feel that out.
I just wanted to check. I didn't hear, did you address the question about getting the home warranty? You brought it up as a negotiating
Oh,
point.
no, I'm sorry. We can't see the questions. So
Oh, I'm sorry. So from behind the screen in the merry old land of Oz, how would the seller get a home warranty for the furnace, and how much about would that cost? I
thank
just
you.
wanted to address that while we're still on point.
Yeah. happy to answer that question. Your real estate agent should be able to secure a home warranty for you. There are many home warranty companies out there. They all cover different things. And they would be able to suggest a couple different companies and you could make the choice and then they can order it for you. And it's paid for at closing. So that it comes out of the proceeds at closing. You don't have to pay for it up front. There are even some home warranty companies that if you as the seller say, oh my gosh, my system's 26 years old and it's July and I'm selling my house. And if the air conditioner goes out, you know, this is going to be a fiasco. So there are some home warranty companies that will insure the seller for free for the duration of the listing with the expectation that they are buying the policy for the buyer when they close.
How much does that run?
Depending on the company, I would say probably between $500 and $800 and depending on what's covered. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Oh, and then the last thing is, so what happens then? The appraisal comes in and it is exactly on the money. It's the same as the contract price. We're good to go. Woohoo, right? We hardly ever hear actually from the seller side from, you know, about the appraisal. We just hear it's good or not. We won't see a copy of the appraisal because who pays for the appraisal, Jean?
The buyer.
The buyer pays for the appraisal. So it's their property. So you'll just know if you're moving forward, right? There have been times in the past where the appraisal might come in low. What happens then, Jean?
Well, if the appraisal comes in low, then you either go back to the negotiating board or the buyer can choose to pay the extra money or the seller can choose to come back down or maybe you split the difference.
So again, it's another negotiation,
Yeah.
right? Now, in this fast-paced market that we find ourselves in, there are some sellers and multiple offers offering what we call an appraisal gap waiver. And what that means is if they offered $250 for the house and it appraises for $245, let's say, if it's just a blank appraisal gap waiver, that means they're going to cover the difference between the appraisal and the contracted price. The reason that someone would have to do that is that a lender, right, if they appraise it at $245, they're not going to pay you $250 for that house because that's not the value. So the buyer who agrees that's the value, that's what they were willing to pay you, will sometimes then make up the difference, but they have to be liquid enough and have cash enough to be able to do that. Yes. All right. Oh, and the last one. Okay. Oh, the buyer has submitted a list of requested repairs. Can I say no? Yes. Again, it's a negotiation, right? So hopefully you could come up to something that you can agree to. And then if in fact you're past appraisal, right? Now the last contingency is kind of like the walkthrough contingency, the mortgage contingency, you're clear to close. So the buyer does a final walkthrough of the home, usually the day before or the day of closing, to make sure that when you took out the baby grand piano, you didn't put a hole in the wall. Or that the things that you said you were going to fix have in fact been fixed. You'll have to send receipts so that they have proof, of course, that it's been fixed. But sometimes, like when I go as a buyer's agent, it's something up in the attic. And it's not a pull down attic. How do I know if it's been fixed? So there should be a receipt for that to go to the buyer. That way they have some recourse to go back if they need any kind of remedy. So what can happen then is the buyer could come to the closing and tell the seller's attorney. Sellers usually aren't at closings. Did you know that?
Yeah.
No. Sellers usually can pre-sign and not have to go to a closing, which is an awesome thing because you can schedule it at your own time, right? Go in and talk to the attorney, hand him all your keys and garage remotes, right? So he could turn them over to the buyer. But what will happen sometimes is the buyer will come in and say, oh my gosh, that seller, I know they were trying to be helpful, but they left half of their furniture assuming that we might want it. And there's like half a garage full of like old paint and, you know,
And a
old
hole in the wall.
old stuff and a hole in the wall. So again, it's a negotiation where a remedy comes up, right? And the attorneys kind of go back and forth with a remedy, even if you're not there as the seller. So we as real estate agents are facilitators, is the way I like to put it. You know, I kind of watch all of these contingencies and dates and things that need to happen and smooth things over that need to be smoothed over and make sure that the emotions that can be definitely part of a transaction are addressed, right? Because you're going to have them, you know, but hopefully my experience or a realtor's experience will help talk you through a lot of that to keep it as calm as it can be for you.
A good realtor or good listing agent is also a good psychologist.
Like Lucy, what is it? 5 cents in. Okay, so then you've got your little home selling roadmap that you can follow that Patty, I think, emailed to you. And if you have a need for one in Spanish, I have one in Spanish as well, but no comprendo uno poquito de español. Solamente uno poquito. Only a little. Okay. So, from a lending perspective, information from sellers, this is very valuable. I think that you bring them this information. It's, you know, not every listing appointment will you get this information because you just have, but you have the realtor across the table from you. So I'm so glad you're able to join us and share information, for our sellers today.
So from a seller's perspective, a buyer is going to have various types of loans that they can be approved for. There's FHA, VA, conventional. FHA and VA are government loans, and they're going to be a little bit more picky about some of the hazardous things like trip hazards outside in the sidewalks or handrails on stairways, peeling paint if the home was built before 1978 because of the potential for lead-based paint. So there's going to be various things that you might want to talk to your mortgage person or your realtor about on why one offer might be better than another when you're looking at accepting an offer. Just because somebody's coming in with an FHA or a VA offer and the connotation in the market might be that those are worse offers, it doesn't mean they actually are worse offers. A lot of times FHA and VA individuals are much more determined to get their property and their loan than conventional with 20-30%, because sometimes those conventional buyers with a lot of money down think that their stuff doesn't stink, and they're less willing to really negotiate ethically and in a smart manner.
They get kind of bossy sometimes, don't they?
They do
can.
sometimes, yeah. So the percentage down doesn't really mean that they're a better buyer. You have to look at the whole picture. Just because they have 20% down doesn't mean that they don't have a spotty job, or their income isn't the greatest, or maybe their credit isn't the greatest. Someone with 3% down might have 800 credit scores and been on the job for 25 years. They just don't want to put more money down because they want to buy furniture, or they want to do some work to the property after they move into it, like maybe redoing the deck or something like that. And they want to save their money, and the payment difference isn't all that great from 3 to 10% down. It's not a huge difference. So don't be deterred by down payment percentages. Now, obviously, if someone's putting 50% down and you can verify that they have the funds, that might be better than a 3% down, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better offer just because someone has a lower down payment. Some mortgage companies will offer pre-underwritten approvals, which is slightly better than a pre-approval, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a guaranteed loan. It sometimes can mean that the borrower or the buyer was so shaky that they felt more comfortable either with their inexperience of being a loan officer, or that they're just not very sure of the person's credit or their job, so they want to have an underwriter physically pre-approve the loan and not just go through an automated underwriting. So just because there's a buyer that has a pre-underwritten approval doesn't mean that they're necessarily a better or worse risk than anybody else. You still want to have your realtor vet them and see why they were pre-underwritten and is it really a benefit? Because sometimes if you're pre-underwritten by one company, that one company might have a higher interest rate than another company, and you might want to switch anyway from a buyer's perspective.
You bring up a very important point, and part of my job is making sure that the people who are making an offer on your home are truly qualified. So I don't just accept a pre-approval letter written by someone that's attached to the contract. I make phone calls on every single pre-approval that comes in to find out, was this a stated income? Did you check the docs? Did you run it through a desktop underwriter? You know, like what have you done with this client to find out how much of a risk this person may or may not think they are. Now, I don't think that they'll tell me that their client's a risk. Obviously, they're trying to, you know, to get a loan for them and get a deal, but what they've done in the process might tell me, you know, a little bit more about that particular buyer. And there are places that I've had good luck with and bad luck with. And as your realtor, I work for you. If I'm presenting 10 offers to you, I may say, you know, this is my opinion, right, on these. I've worked with this lender before, great lender, right? I've worked with this company before as a lending company. I've had trouble closing a few times, right? So you get to garner my experience as part of your decision-making process.
And as a buyer, if you are eventually buying, you want to make sure you're working with somebody that works weekends and evenings, because if you as a seller, or if you as a buyer and your seller says highest and best by Sunday at 7 p.m., you may need to, somebody may need to get a hold of that loan officer on that Sunday or in that late Saturday evening for an updated pre-approval letter, or to ask those questions that a good listing agent will ask. And then sometimes if a buyer is asking for closing costs, sometimes that might just be to buy that interest rate down. A seller or a buyer can use seller paid closing costs to buy the rate down, to not only to help them qualify. Sometimes it's to help them qualify, but sometimes it's just to get out of a certain mental capacity for higher interest rates. And it makes it easier for you to take the higher interest rates because you're getting a little bit lower than you would normally. So a seller giving credits for bang down interest rates is not very uncommon, and it can help sometimes. Depending on the buyer, it could make sense or it might not make sense, but I wouldn't be deterred by a buyer asking for closing costs for buying down the interest rate.
You have just brought up a term that we've not talked about, though. So now we're going to have to talk about it. So, how do I say this? So let's say your house is $250,000, like we talked about already. And your buyer gives you an offer for $260,000. They might, right? In this market, if it's highest and best, but they're asking for $10,000 back in closing cost credits. This is kind of what you're talking about. Seller pays. What did you call it? Seller covered? Seller, what did you?
Seller funded or
seller funded or seller paid closing cost credits. The buyer is still getting a loan, right? For $260,000.
It was based on
$260,000. But you as the seller would only be getting $250,000 if there's a $10,000 closing cost credit. So again, a lot of these nuances, your realtor will have to talk you through so that you know bottom line.
What's your bottom line?
What that means for you. Absolutely. Was there another question? All I see is little numbers on the Q&A. read the questions over one.
Hi, it's me. So I took the question from the Q&A and I put it in the chat to you two, but I'll read it. It is, what is the best strategy for selling as is when you live in a neighborhood that sees tear downs all the time?
Best strategy is pricing it right for condition and location. I've run across in the last few weeks a lot of properties that are not updated, don't show well, but the seller feels that they should get the same dollar amount as one that's been updated, right? And that has been freshly painted and is ready to go to market. So it's really understanding the difference. If it were, in the example, was it the neighborhood is experiencing tear downs, right? Let me go back and read it. What's the best strategy for selling as is when you live in a neighborhood that sees tear downs? Again, if it's priced right for condition and location and your home is in good shape, then it needs to be priced that way. And your realtor should give you that best information comparing apples to apples. I usually do a two-step approach when I do listings. You know, I told you about the example where I go to your home and I kind of look around, and I've already run comps, so I have an average idea of what your model sells for in your subdivision. And I usually give you that information. But once I've been to your home and I can see what exactly you've done, what type of condition it's in, then I can go back and really delve into the photographs and the information of those comparatives that I've given to you and fine tune the dollar amount where I think you should be. And I would think that any realtor or listing agent should be able to do that for you.
And subdivisions will have two types of tear downs. You'll have a subdivision that has tear downs because the properties are dilapidated and they can't be lived in. And then there's subdivisions that have tear downs that are livable properties that are really decent properties, but they're being torn down, not because they have to be, but because they're building McMansions and
Building
things like
larger things there instead.
that. So that's a different mentality when you're going to sell in those two.
Right, but your professional should be able to advise you on pricing for that. You know, it's not a fire sale just because you're in that kind of neighborhood. And if they ever treat you like that's the case, then it's time to call a different professional to give you their opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. And oh, are we at the end already?
Yep.
An hour in? Okay. Well, we are at the end of our top 10 seller questions. It's been our pleasure to be here with you tonight. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I'm not seeing any come up, and I am zoning in on the Q&A and the chat. The good news is, if you have a question, you know, you can always reach out to tonight's presenters. You can also hold on to your questions, although you don't really need to, but you can hold on to them and ask them when we invite them back on March 11th.
Certainly, yes. You are invited. Everyone's invited to come back on March 11th to our top 10 home buyers questions. A lot of people, if they're thinking of selling their home, and I'm sorry, this slide is incorrect. I apologize. Don't pay attention to it. March 11th is the correct date. A lot of people who are selling are moving somewhere else, right? Right now, if you have a home sale contingency or a home close contingency, that may be hard to buy something because it's not as competitive if you're moving on to buy something else. So there are strategies to help you buy in those situations, especially if you have some equity in your home, and you'll learn about those at the Home Buyer Top 10 Questions on March 11th. So thank you so much. If you'll click to the next slide, here's our information once again. If you are interested in, you know, following us. You know, we have our own Facebook pages. Jean and I together have a Hoffman Estates real estate page on Facebook. We could always answer your questions there. If you have any questions, you could message us on Facebook. If you feel safer doing that, then giving out a email or a phone number. But Jean and I are very like-minded in that we are very community spirited. We feel that we need to do the right thing, that not having information can be so damaging to consumers to not know where to go and what to do. We like to be the source that you can trust.
And sometimes you just aren't quite sure if the information you're getting from your professional is correct. Something's telling you to question it. We don't have any problem telling you, yeah, that's correct. Your professional is giving you the correct information. You have a good person there working with you. You know, we'll be completely 100% honest.
Absolutely. So thanks for coming tonight. We wish it could have been in person, but maybe we'll see you next year. Hopefully not. Hopefully y'all sell your home this year. Thanks.
Keeping the faith. Thank you both for coming tonight, and I'll see you in just a few weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All right,
Kit.
take care.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everyone.